My guest today is Rachelle Gaiman. She has worked as a psychic medium for over 10 years and still sees clients regularly. As a niece of the world renowned psychic medium Reverend Anne Gaiman, she was mentored by her aunt at a young age to utilize her gifts naturally. Rachelle had a near death experience in 1994, and she's here to share that with us. Welcome, Rachelle. I'm honored to have you.
Oh, I'm honored to be here, Tia. Thank you so much for having me. This is really great. Yeah.
Yes, well, thank you. And so you had a near death experience in 1994. Can you start by telling us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was I was in my 30s. My son was a toddler. And I was outside. It was during a time in my life where I was really struggling. I felt kind of imprisoned, in a way. A lot of things were not going well. I was in an abusive, narcissistic relationship, really. And, I was raising my son and so forth. And I happened to be outside. And it was funny because I was in deep thought when it happened. And I actually was outside doing some landscaping work. And I actually got stung by, it was a tarantula wasp. And I saw it. I turned and I saw it. And it looked like this black wasp. And then all of a sudden, I started itching really bad. My feet were itching and stuff like that. So I went into the house and I put my feet in the bathtub trying to get that itching, and it wouldn't stop. And I didn't know what was going on. And at the time, my son was over at the neighbor's playing right next door. And my husband wasn't home at the time. And I said, I just got stung by a bee. And I think I'm having an allergic reaction. He said, get to the hospital. So I went over to the neighbors and I had told the neighbor really quick, I think I got just stung, because she was outside too. So when I went over there, I said, I'm going to drive myself to the hospital. I think I'm having an allergic reaction. She took one look at me. Happened to be a nurse, thank God. She says, you're not driving to the hospital. She says, I am taking you. And I didn't realize that I was in anaphylactic shock. And so she put the kids in the car and, I was there. They didn't know what was going on. And I actually, because the fact that I was raised in a spiritualist family and so forth, I just started to breathe. I just closed my eyes and started to breathe. And she gets me to the hospital and I actually got to walk in. And right when I walked in, I thought I was going to faint. And I said, I'm ready to faint. I'm feeling like I'm going to go down. And they immediately put me on a gurney and they could tell that I was in anaphylactic shock. And during that time, they put me on a gurney and it took them 3 epinephrines with a saline wash. They hooked me up to an IV before they revived me. And during that time, it was very interesting because I actually didn't go over like the way people go over. But because of my spiritual background, I immediately started talking to my guides. I talked incessantly. And what I said to them, I'm not going. I'm raising my son. I am not going. And because I think it just became this dialogue where I don't know if I had a choice or not, but I let them know that I wasn't going. It's not my time. I'm going to raise my son. And I was very adamant. And I didn't even want to go over. And I was very adamant about that. And, being in a situation where I had experienced narcissistic abuse in a relationship. And uh, I had really lost my way and I had lost my soul. And I became a shell of a person. I really did. And so this when this happened and I was talking to my guides that or the people that were around me and I was so adamant and I had such a strong will that I was not going, that I was going to raise my son. And that's when I started to come back in my body, and I saw orange, but I wasn't done. I was still in that peaceful, loving feeling of the other side. And when I came to, the nurse said, uh, "We almost lost you." And she said that it took them, that's when she told me it took them three three epinephrines to revive me. And they said I wasn't going to have enough time next time that it happened. And so after that, my husband drove to the emergency room and relieved the woman, who my next door neighbor, and got Cameron and so forth. And then when I left the hospital, I was in deep reflection for probably a month about my life and about my life choices and what had happened. And, the fact that I grew up in a spiritual family, and, I was actually a medium when I was little, and then I turned it off and I went to school and got a business degree and all that stuff. And then, we fell on hard times, and, um, I wasn't married that long. I was only married for 5 years, but it was extremely difficult. There were all these circumstances. It was just horrific when I think back to the time, the trauma that I was experiencing, and to have that experience. I didn't tell anybody. My parents knew that I had gotten stung by a bee and I almost lost my life, but we didn't go into the deep reflection that I had. And I made an about face. That's when I decided I had been extremely unhappy and that I can't live the rest of my life like this. And as a result, I decided that I had to take a new path. And that's when I got out of that situation, and I didn't care if I left with anything. I just wanted my soul back. And so from there, it was a climb. It was 7 years after that. But the thing is that that point when I had all that time of reflection, I never, it was all internal. And then I didn't even revisit it until I got involved in the IANDS group. And I thought, well, I've never had a near death experience, but I love these people because they've been, they understand how spirit works, and, they've been over the other side and they feel the love and the joy and all this other stuff. And then I realized, oh my God, I've been in denial. I was totally in denial. And then just exploring it with some of the ions people that attending some of the support, some of the meetings and so forth. I said, oh yeah, I've had one. I guess I did have one. And I really haven't talked about it in depthly, except with one other person. But I look back on it now, and it was really a huge pivotal moment in my life. Now, I didn't step into my mediumship right away. There was a long journey there, but I think it was totally necessary for me to reclaim my soul and get back on track. And, my mother said something to me because I had been financially devastated at the time. And my mother said, you're young enough, you can put your life back together. And she was right. And, at that time I had no, um, I was a single mother for 15 years, so I didn't even think about mediumship at that time. I was just thinking I was in survival mode for many, many years. And and then one day, it just came upon me that um, I've always been in sales, okay? And so what happened here was, because I was always in sales, you have to hit your number or you're gone. That's kind of the way that it is. And you better produce or you're gone. And it's so performance driven, and it can be, toxic. It's just kind of that way. It's not a really great career. It's very much that way. And then so I guess one day, I'd been through a few downsizings in my career. And one day I just thought, I'm really tired of this. And the buck stops here. And I've got to really figure out. So I went through this other time of reflection about what am I good at? What is it? What are my gifts? And they always say that your gifts are right in front of you. And it's like, oh yeah, I can do mediumship. So what? And it's really funny because I discounted it, but I took this test that had all these questions, and the questions came up and I answered them. It was a 2.5 hour process, and I realized that that's what I was supposed to be doing, was serving spirit and making my contribution to humanity with my gifts. And so that kind of, it was, that timeline was kind of a long time of me getting there, but it was truly amazing. And I'm so grateful. And that was such a blessing in my life at the time. And it's also been a blessing meeting all the people at the IANDS group and how supportive they are, and listening to their stories. And, I was just in awe. It's like, oh, wow. And I asked Spirit, well, why didn't I have that type of experience? And they said, well, you didn't need it because you already were awakened. And I was, because Spirit's always been in my life, you know?
When you had your near-death experience, what was it like? Did you have any emotions or feelings? Did you have a body?
Yeah. So thinking back, I can really go back to that point where I was on that, I was on the gurney, and I remember just closing my eyes, and I don't I know I was out of my body, but I didn't have the vision that everybody did. It was like I was immediately like in a tunnel, and there were guides all around me. And I just was very adamant. I am not going, because I loved my son so much. And there was a lot happening in that moment, from an emotional perspective, because there was such a struggle in my marriage, and my husband didn't really know who I was. And one of the thoughts that I had at that time was, my son's not even going to know me. And he's going to have the perception of what my husband thinks I am, which is not who I am at all. And then I had this flash that if he got up to do the eulogy, everybody be looking around like, who the heck is he talking about? Because the perception of who I was as a person and his perception were totally, there was such a gap. And so what kept me going in that moment was, I am not going. This is not negotiable. I mean, I was so adamant in that moment. You can't take me. I know what it's like. I believe, I already know what it's like. I know that it's beautiful and all this other stuff, but you're not taking me. This is not over for me. And I was, the will in that moment was, uh, great. Uh, so it was a little bit different than what other people's experience, because they go over, and now I experience that in meditation, where I go over and, I had this wonderful peaceful feeling and the love and all of that. I've always had that when I've connected with spirit. But as soon as I was there and it was dark, and I sensed the people, the angel, they were angels, I immediately said no, and the will was so strong. And I don't know if they gave me a choice or not, or they were just holding me there until, they got everything from a body perspective worked on. But I was I was, I'm Dutch, so I can say this. I was talking like a Dutch uncle. I mean, I would not shut up because, and I basically said that this is not negotiable because I couldn't end my life there. I couldn't. It was such a dark and desperate time in my life. And I wasn't who I was supposed to be. And I knew it, you know? I just knew it. And they gave me this medication. I was to rest and I spent time and all I did was all this spiritual reflection. I couldn't even talk to anybody because it was like, oh my God, I about lost it. And I would, the way I was living was just horrific. And, the thing is that I don't want to say anything like I was so victimized because really what we know now is that this was a beautiful lesson in love, self love. People that are narcissistic that come into our lives teach, it's a wonderful teaching moment to take responsibility for your recovery, to see how much you don't love yourself and how much you need to love yourself. And that love doesn't exist on the outside, it comes from within. Everything comes from within, and that we're the creators of our universe. And so that's why it was like, I can't let go yet. I just can't, you know? And so and instinctively I knew all of that. And I was very adamant. I and the you were talking about the emotion. If hopefully the emotion is coming across about I can't go yet. I just can't. And I guess if it was my time, they would have taken me. But it certainly woke me up and made me realize how I was living and how I wanted to move into a different direction of my life.
And the angels and your spiritual guides that you felt around you, do you feel like they were familiar to you
Oh
or?
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. They had been with me. They felt very familiar. It was a knowing that, they had been there or that they've been there all my life. And I knew it. I even knew it instinctively my whole life that they were there. And yeah. And I guess they just held me in this space that was wonderful. But they couldn't shut me up. I didn't want to have anything to hear what they had to say. You're not taking me. And I'm grateful that it wasn't that bad because and they knew it, they knew the outcome, right? But I didn't at that time, and I certainly, uh, my, my son at the time, and still is, uh, was my biggest blessing and my pride and joy. And he gave me hope every single day. And I just couldn't leave him.
Well, I'm sure he appreciated you coming back from the other side just for him. It's amazing what love can really do.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I don't think I ever told him about that. I don't think he knows, you
Well,
know?
I'm sure he knows he's very important.
Yeah, he does. He
And
does, yeah.
so, when you had your near death experience, do you think
Mhm.
that reopened the doors to your mediumship since you had shut it off? Do you think it opened maybe like a portal or a doorway between you and the other side?
Well, it definitely did. Now, when I was younger, I constantly had visions, and my mother didn't know what to do with it. But my aunt was a very famous psychic medium. So, and my mother became very open to it. My mother actually had a theology degree. And so she was very open and she listened and she didn't poo poo it in any way. And so she really provided that comfort. And she would reach out to my aunt because she didn't know how to explain any of this. She didn't, but she was open to it. And I was having more prophetic visions at that particular time where I would see things happen or I'd have a knowing and I just knew things were going to happen. Um, and then my aunts always worked with me when I was a little girl from the standpoint of, there's different clairs that we utilize in mediumship. And she would say, what are you sensing? What are you feeling? And she was very strong that way. And my gifts were more of a seer where I had clairvoyance. And so, you know, and yes, that was opened. But then I kind of let it go because of the fact that was a single mom and I was in survival mode until one day I went to see this gentleman, Tim Brainerd. It was so funny. I was saying to a girlfriend who was from Cleveland. And at the time I grew up in Michigan and I was living in Michigan at the time. And I said, I think I need to go see a medium. And she said, well, why don't you go see Reverend Tim Brainerd? And I said, well, where is he? And she says, well, he's in Cleveland. He's a really great guy. I said, really? I'm going to be in Cleveland on Tuesday. So she says, you need to call him. And so I did. And I said, well, I'm the niece of Reverend Ann Gaiman. He goes, oh, I know Annie. I've known Annie for 40 years. And so he knew my aunt. And he says, you come by and see me. And where this fits in is that he started the reading and I sat down and he looked at me and he said, well, first of all, he says, there's 3 Johns here, which was, John Gaiman, John Paul, and another John Gaiman. And so I said, yeah, that's my family. And he said, you're not listening. He points at me, you're not listening to spirit. That's what he said to me. And I went, he's right. I'm not. He said, you're in this, there's a song by Roy Orbison. He said, California Blue. I want you to go listen to it. That's you. He said, you're working, you're like on roller skates and you're not even taking a moment to smell the roses. And he's right. And then he said to me, Spirit has a surprise for you at the end of the year. That's what he said. And right then and there, he was right. That's when I stepped into my mediumship. And it was so funny because I'll never forget it. I was in San Francisco and I had a meeting with my boss. And again, they were going to do some downsizing. And it's like, oh, here it comes again, right? So I get to my hotel room and it didn't happen that day. They said, well, we'll look after the first of the year, we'll look at it. And I literally went to my hotel room and I sat down and I literally heard the spirit world cheer. I heard them cheer. And I went, well, okay, if you're celebrating, I'm going to celebrate too. So we'll just figure this out. So that's how I got into my mediumship. And then right then and there, that's when just everything fell into place. And I started that March, I was in an expo. I was tested and for the Healing Bodies and Spirit Expo. And they tested me and they went, oh my God, Rachelle, you're one of the best readers we have. And we want you in it. And I was scared at that point. I didn't sleep at night when I knew I was going to have to be tested. And, from there, it just all unfolded and it was just where I was supposed to be. And being of service to spirit. And since then, it's just been, it has evolved. My mediumship has evolved. I've really started working in the love vibration. I've written a book and I've, I really am here to serve humanity and make my contribution. And I'm teaching classes on mediumship. And I also am doing an advanced mediumship mentorship group where I have working mediums that are part of that really want to expand not only their mediumship, but they want to expand their business. And so I'm helping them set all that up and do that. And we're really going deep. And it really comes down to releasing all the traumas that we've had in our life, looking at them as wonderful blessings, how they can be such blessings in our lives, and releasing them and providing the healing and allow spirit to come in and allow ourselves to be guided to our purpose. And usually our gifts are right in front of us, they're right there. So I'm working with them to get rid of the self doubt and all the limitations, and just releasing all of that, so the evidence can come more in, and they can express spirit more fully when they're doing readings. So yeah, it's really been a wonderful journey.
Yeah, it sounds like the near death experience was kind of a reset for you, get you back on tracks. You had fallen away from your purpose, and then slowly but surely, after your near death experience, you started implementing these changes.
Yeah, Tia, it was amazing. And, I think back and, it was so funny because I stepped into my mediumship before I even thought of all that. And it wasn't until I got involved with the IANDS group, it's like, oh, yeah, I guess I had one, you know? And it was just, I guess I buried it, because back then I didn't really know about the IANDS group. I didn't know about anybody who had really a near death experience. And I really didn't call it that. It was, and then I started thinking about it. It's like, oh, I guess I did. I guess I did have that experience, and I guess I should be sharing it. I didn't even write about it in my book. It's so funny. I didn't. I laid out kind of a path there, but I didn't. That's how far in denial I was.
Well,
So,
you're here sharing it now, and I think that's so important for people like you to come out and share your experiences, because like you, people have had things happen to them and they're not really sure where it fits in or what it was. And I know I had some strange experiences and I didn't know, and I had to consult others because I was not familiar with spiritual experiences. I didn't know what was going on. So that's important to get your story out. Yes, thank you for being here and sharing it. I think that you'll help many others understand that their experience is valid, and also for other folks who maybe are experiencing different kinds of spiritual experiences, or people that are grieving. I think it helps a lot of people who are grieving to heal, um, at least in part, from the loss of their loved one, or people that are facing death. It helps to ease some of their fear if they're not sure where they're going. So I
oh
appreciate it
yeah,
very much.
yeah. Thank you for that, Tia. And that's so true. There is a lot of confusion about it, and there is, from the standpoint of judgment, which there's none. That is a huge lie and illusion. We are not judged. We are so respected because we have chosen to have this experience on this physical plane. If you think about it, we come down here in a world where there's light and dark, there's total dichotomy, and that then you enter in everybody's free will, and we have to navigate all of that, right? And it's like, and then they have traumas and so forth, and how do we navigate it? I mean, the essence is of us is so loved by spirit, and everyone is so loved. And the fact that you've had a death experience means that there is contribution and ways to be of service to humanity. Spirit works overtime to make sure that humanity is balanced and that we don't destroy ourselves. They really work to create harmony, and that's what they want for all of us, and we are so loved and respected because we've chosen to have this experience. And not only this physical world experience, but even when we've called the near death experience in, if we've been victimized by something, we are responsible for our recovery. And what do we do with that? And where do we go? And it's really looking at becoming empowered through that. And once we become empowered through that, I was victimized by the narcissistic abuse, and then I had to become empowered. But then from there, going from to me, which was victimization, by me, where I was powering through life, now everything is happening through me with spirit. So, and then it's just me, and we just get to the point where we just are, and we are loved just by being. That's all. That's all we have to do is just be ourselves, be our authentic true self, and we are so loved.
After your near death experience, you switched gears from sales over to mediumship. And you're working with the public, helping others, and even teaching mediumship classes. Is that something, the different clairs, is that something that everyone is gifted with and we just need to learn how to develop?
Absolutely. It is our birthright. It really is. And the book that I wrote, it's called The Heartfelt Medium, Developing Your Mediumship Naturally. It's just about learning the mechanics of mediumship and how it works. So I really appeal to your left brain on how you do it, um, on how you do mediumship, and then and I give you all the basics. Um, so yeah, so the clairs are things that you have. We all have them naturally, and it's just about tuning in. Spirit speaks to all of us. It's just how they speak to you and learning how they are speaking to you. And some of the tips, I guess, is if you're just standing there or like you're just doing something very something where your mind, maybe you're washing dishes or something like that, I don't know. And you have something drop in your mind, that's spirit. And it comes in very quickly, because they're at a higher vibration. They're speaking to you and they're speaking to us, and we just have to learn to grab onto when it comes in. And that's all the training is. And, I put together the mechanics of mediumship for developing mediumship, and it's kind of like driving a car, right? You learn how, but you can't drive a car by reading about it. You actually have to do it. And so I give you all the tools to do it, to learn it, to develop it. And then you practice. And it's really a beautiful unfoldment. But everybody has it. It's just learning how spirit speaks to you and your gifts and your spirit language. And I tried to help people figure out what everybody has what they call a dominant clair, whether it's sensing or feeling, whether it's seeing. And so I test everybody through just like it's just really, it's not a mediumship test. It's about sensing or feeling, and you write down your answer really quickly, and you find out what your dominant clair is. And so as a teacher, I work with that dominant clair with you so you can have immediate success, because I want you to have immediate success. And once that's developed, then the other clairs start to come in. And so, and they unfold, and then you're using all of them. But it's really an exercise, and you use your body as a barometer because spirit is so subtle. It's very subtle. But if we, as we get information, and so we have to tune into that, and we have to train ourselves, our mind, our body, everything to tune into that. But anybody can do this. In fact, I wish everybody would do it. So there's no mediums, you know, so they could do it for themselves, because really, it's there for all of us to tap into.
Is it your spirit guides or those angels that you saw or you felt on the other side? Is that who is feeding you the information?
Yeah, so we all have a guide team, right? Some people refer to it as our spirit team. And we have a protector, which I really feel is more of our higher self. That higher self is really the pureness of who we are, that really has sight into the landscape of everything, And then we have a healer guide, we have a teacher, and we have a joy guide. And then we have specialty guides that come in and out. But really our main guide is one that is assigned to us for all of our days. And they are learning, I believe that they are learning from us having this physical experience while they're in the spirit world, and they're learning from us as well. And So they're with us the whole time, and the love is just incredible. I mean, and you can call them in, and they're wonderful. You know, a lot of people want to name their guides, you know, which is fine. I don't think that it matters to them. You know, they probably think we're being really cute or something, but we always put these humanistic qualities to these wonderful beings that are just amazing. And but they love us so much. And I can tell you the love that we experience from spirit is so much greater than what we could ever receive here on this earth. And the love that we receive here from people is just icing on the cake, and spirit's the cake, you know?
I love
Yeah.
that. Do you feel like
Yeah.
our higher self is there with our guides as
Oh,
well?
yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely, for sure. It's a whole team. And, you know, it's amazing. I can just imagine the construct, and then also the what they're constructing when a person comes to get a reading, or what they're doing and conspiring to put all this together to help humanity is just amazing. You know, I remember when I was going to do an exercise, for example, in psychometry for one of my classes. And all of a sudden I saw my dad there, and he's like got everybody gathered, you know, and he's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And so, like, they had I felt like they had a meeting up there for my entire class, you know, and, you know, my class guides were there and everything. So, class members' guides were there and everything. So, it's just amazing. I mean, they work so symbiotically with us, with the people that come for readings, and what they coordinate on the other side. I can just imagine everything that happens. It's just truly amazing, and it's magical. And it's all done with love. So amazing.
You offer readings to the public. Do you specialize in any type of reading, maybe contacting lost loved ones or the future, relationships?
Yeah, I
What?
do all of that.
Okay.
Yeah, as far as my specialty, I do work. A lot of people who have lost loved ones will come to me, you know, and usually their loved ones will come through, and it's so beautiful. They bring forth evidence of who they are, and they get very specific for the person. And then they always have a message. It's not just that they come through and we list the evidence, but it's also about the message. So usually we don't know who's going to come through, but sometimes, you know, we can usually connect with who they want, but it's always a message, and it's always riddled with healing, guidance, upliftment, and reassurance for the person that comes. And the healing, in fact, I got a message today from a woman who had lost her son, and she had been feeling so much anxiety for the past 3 years. And she just said, Rachelle, I have been praying and praying. And she just sent me a message today, and the peace that she found and the healing that she found. And that's the reason I do what I do. And it was just so beautiful. And she's just so grateful. And it wasn't me, you know, I appreciate that. But really, it was her son and me representing spirit for her, and allowing spirit to deliver the message. But also, I also specialize in relationships. It's so funny because a lot of times the people that we do readings for are people that are attracted to us because of our life experiences, or spirit kind of arranges that. So I do help women with narcissistic abuse. I do help women with relationship issues. And it's instinctive, you know, that I help them with. I'm married now. I'm married to a great guy, and I'm just very grateful. And he's very simple, and he just accepts my mediumship because he knows the contribution and the service that I do, and he's very supportive of everyone and everything. And um, so yeah, I do all of that. And a lot of times things will come up that I will see, you know, that they'll give me information on. Like if people are looking for a new position or something like that, I can see that. You know, a lot of times spirit answers the questions before they ask. So a lot of times people will come in with a lot of questions and all of a sudden everything is answered. And they said, I didn't even have to look at this. You answered every single one of them. So yeah. So I do both. So those are considered psychic reads. Okay. But then the mediumship read is specifically when um, loved ones come in and they connect and they have a message to share.
I just want to make note, you said earlier about the woman who had lost her son that it wasn't you, but I want you to know it is you. You've become a conduit. So you're doing very good work, very important work, and giving people a lot of peace. So don't discredit yourself. You are definitely part of that.
Well,
Um,
thank you. I'm
well,
humbled and honored is what I want to say. So, yeah.
for sure, your gifts are very special. While you're doing readings and your mediumship work, can you work with people at a distance?
Yes, absolutely. When I do mediumship work, I saw a lot of people. I moved, so I'm in South Carolina now, and I did a lot of readings in Michigan. And so I do a lot of readings on Zoom. I do them all over globally now, everywhere. And so I use Zoom, and that doesn't matter. I can still connect with the energy. Their loved ones still come in. It's really beautiful. So whether you're in, you know, in person or if you're on Zoom, it really doesn't matter. I even do them over the phone. So it really doesn't matter. Spirit is spirit, and they're wherever their loved ones are. That's where they show up.
I've heard that energy is energy, and distance and space and time, they don't really truly exist as we understand them to be. So, distant healings, distant readings, it doesn't really matter.
Absolutely. Totally 100%. It doesn't matter. Space and time and it just doesn't matter. It really doesn't. Yeah.
Well, if any of my viewers would like to reach out to you, how can they find you?
Yeah, so the way that they can reach me, I have my website which is RachelleGaiman.com, and it's RACHELLE Gaiman, GEHMAN.com. That's one of the ways. And then my book is on Amazon, which is The Heartfelt Medium, Developing Your Mediumship Naturally. Those are the best ways. Or you can contact me at Rachelle at RachelleGaiman.com. So there's a few ways to get me, and I'm on Facebook too. So that's another way as well. That's how we met, Tia.
That is how we met. We met on Facebook.
Yeah. So, it was the perfect place. So, yeah, and I'm open and available and thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I mean, just going through the experience again, I haven't really talked about it. So, I'm grateful to share it.
I'm grateful to have you. Do you have any last words for anyone who may be facing death or have lost a loved one or maybe had a strange experience that they can't explain?
Yeah, well, those are three kind of, there's a lot to unpack there, but I guess one of the things that I would say is if anybody is facing death and they're afraid, don't be, because it's so beautiful on the other side. I mean, it's just so loving and beautiful. And, if you've lost a loved one, I just want to say that grief is a very natural thing. And in our society now, it doesn't really help because of everybody expects you to just get over it. And it's something that just like in nature, a tree grows in its own time. That's the same way with grief. And just because I have the ability to tap into the spirit world doesn't mean that I don't experience grief when I lose a loved one. And so I just want you to honor that and feel the feelings. And it takes time to integrate that. And what I would say is that if someone does lose a loved one, you're very vulnerable in the grieving process. And so be very have great discernment in who you allow in your life, as far as new people, because there are a lot of predators that can sense that your rawness. And so take time for healing, making sure that you're honoring yourself. The first year you're frozen, the second year you start to thaw out, the third and fourth year you start to really figure out, uh, now you can live without that person. Now, that losing a child is totally different. It's totally different. Year two is the worst. And there is just such a feeling of loss there. And I don't want to say that it's going to ever end. But what you do learn is that they are in a wonderful place and they're working on the other side, and that you've chosen to have that experience to have strength, and that it was a contract that happened before you came down, and it shows the strength and the courage that you've had, but your child is still alive and well and doing work on the other side that's so beautiful. And so I don't know if that gives anybody comfort, but I don't want anybody to think that because you're a medium that you can skip the grieving process. You can't. We are all lose people that we love, but there is a wonderful healing and reassurance that can occur and from having that experience and knowing that they're going to be all right and you're going to be all right too.
That's really
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that
Oh,
with us.
you are so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you also for coming to be my guest and for all the wonderful work you're doing to help others.
Thank you, Tia. I'm so grateful. This is a wonderful platform and I wish you all the best.